In 1904, a crew of fishermen sailed far off the coast, hoping to fill their hold after a poor season. They were steady men, used to cold winds, long lines, and the quiet routines of the North Atlantic. But the farther they traveled, the more the sea changed. The birds fell away, the water darkened, and late one night, something tapped the hull in slow, deliberate knocks that none of them could name. They didn't realize that something was already following them. So before we continue, please make sure you leave a like and let us know where you're watching from. Thanks. I was 20 years old in the summer of 1904, the youngest hand aboard the schooner Marion Bell out of a small harbor on the Newfoundland coast. The older men still called me boy, though I had been hauling lines long enough to split my palms and thicken my fingers. We lived by the catch, and that year the talk on the wharf was all about cod moving farther off, deeper than before, where the charts turned pale and empty. When Captain Doyle said he meant to try a ground the others avoided, nobody argued. There is not much room for argument when the barrels are light and the winter is never far away. We set out before dawn under a raw gray sky. The harbor lamps shrank behind us, swallowed by mist and drizzle. The sea had that steady, heavy motion that works its way into your legs and stays there. The air smelled of salt, tar, old fish, and coal smoke drifting from the town behind us. I remember how my breath showed pale in front of me, even though it was meant to be summer. The older men said the cold was a good sign, that it kept the meat firm. I nodded along and tried to copy the way they moved on the wet deck, as if the boards were part of their own bodies. There were 7 of us. Captain Doyle, square-shouldered and quiet, with the habit of chewing his pipe stem even when it was cold and empty. O'Rourke, the mate, who spoke with his hands as much as with his mouth and liked to joke about my clumsy knots. Baptiste, a Frenchman from Saint-Pierre, short and thick through the chest, who sang under his breath when he worked old Murphy, who had a bad knee and worse temper but could read the sea better than any of us. Eli, a dark-eyed man who seldom spoke more than a few words at a time. Tom Barrett, broad and slow-moving, who could haul a loaded tub as if it weighed nothing. Then there was me, the smallest among them, trying not to show how my stomach turned whenever the bow dropped hard. Our purpose was simple on paper. We would sail 2 days out to a rough ground beyond the usual banks, sound the bottom, lay out long lines, and fill the hold with cod. The merchants did not care where the fish came from as long as they were fat and plentiful. On the charts, the place we were headed was only a faint shading with a few soundings marked in ink, numbers without names. The older men had another name for it, but they never used it in front of the captain. I only heard it whispered once on the wharf when they thought I was out of earshot. They called it the Hollow. The wind stayed steady on our beam through the first day, pushing us along at a good pace. We took turns at the wheel and on lookout, checked the rigging, mended lines, and kept busy the way men do when they do not want to think too long about where they are headed. Old Murphy sat near the bow with his back against a coil of rope, fingers busy with a rosary so worn that the beads had flat spots. He moved his thumb over them without looking down. From time to time he glanced at the water with a narrow frown, as if waiting for it to answer a question. Near evening of the first day, the fog rolled in fast, thickening around us until the world shrank to the creak of wood and the slap of waves on the hull. The light went early, swallowed by the low cloud. We lit the masthead lamp and a deck lantern. Their glow seemed weak in that gray curtain. I remember how quiet the others went as the fog closed in, how their talk faded into the sound of dripping rigging and the dull thump of the rudder. The bell on the bow rang with each slow pitch, a hollow mark of time that never quite settled into a pattern. Around then, the first odd thing happened, though I did not understand it at the time. The seabirds that had been following us all afternoon dropped away one by one. First the gulls, then the darker birds that skimmed close to the waves. Their cries grew thin behind us and then stopped entirely. I did not notice until Baptiste lifted his head in the middle of some song I did not know and listened. "Too quiet," he said. O'Rourke laughed once and told him to save his breath for hauling. But when I looked up into the fog, there was nothing there. No circling shapes, no flashes of white wings, just the flat gray above and the flat gray around. I felt something slide under my ribs, something I could not name. I told myself it was only the fog and the hour. We dropped anchor that night rather than feel our way ahead blind. The captain was not a man who liked to risk his hull on unknown shoals. The chain rattled out, the hook bit, and the Marion Bell settled with her bow to the swell. The fog wrapped us close. The lantern on deck cast a small circle of yellow light that seemed to float in a world of wet wool. We ate in low voices and turned in early, each man to his narrow berth or corner on the deck. Sleep came in fits. I woke more than once to the sound of water knocking against the hull in short, uneven blows as if something heavy turned below. The Marion Bell had her own noises, and the older hands always said a man got used to them. But these sounded different. There was a weight to them that made the timbers answer. Once, when the knocking came close under where I lay, I felt it through the thin mattress and the planks beneath it, a dull jolt that made my teeth meet. In the dim of the forecastle, I heard Eli shift above me. "You feel that?" I whispered. His voice came down quiet. "Go back to sleep." "What is it?" "Just water," he said, but there was no ease in his tone. The next morning the fog lifted in patches, torn by a pale sun that never fully broke through. The sea around us looked different. The color had changed, from the usual slate blue to a darker, almost black shade that seemed to drink the light instead of throwing it back. When we sounded, the lead line ran down and down before Baptiste called the depth. It was deeper than we expected, enough to make old Murphy spit over the side. "We are close," he said. I asked, "Close to what?" He did not answer. He only wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and stared at a patch of water where nothing at all was happening. We raised anchor and moved on, following the captain's chosen bearing. By midday, the wind had eased, and the sails hung with a loose, tired set. O'Rourke had us at the oars to keep some headway, 6 men pulling in dull rhythm while Eli kept a hand on the wheel and watched the compass. Sweat ran down my back despite the chill in the air. The only sound was our breath, the dull scrape of oars and thole pins, and the small noises the schooner always made when she moved. The longer we pulled, the more I felt that the air itself was pressing down. No one said much. Now and then O'Rourke gave a word to keep us in rhythm. My shoulders burned and my hands cramped on the oar handle. I fixed my eyes on the line of the rail ahead of me and tried not to look too often at the water. Tom's oar hit something first. There was a dull thud, not the sharp knock of wood on drift, but a muffled stop that shook the loom in his hands. He grunted and almost lost his grip. The oar jumped half out of the water. A smear of pale stuff slid along the blade and dropped back into the sea. "Hold!" the captain snapped. We let the oars drag. The schooner lost way and began to swing. For a moment, everything was quiet again, except for the small slap of waves along the hull. "What was that?" I asked. Tom stared at his oar. A stringy, colorless slime clung to the edge of the blade. It glistened in a way I did not like. He scraped it off with his thumbnail and flicked it overboard, then wiped his hand on his trousers with a look of disgust. "Felt soft," he said, "not wood." Old Murphy leaned out over the side, squinting at the water. Nothing broke the surface, only that dark swell rolling slow. "Something's down there," he muttered. "Always is," O'Rourke said, but the words came out thin. The captain glanced at the compass again, then at the lead line coiled near the rail. "We are not out here to stare at the sea," he said. "Back to it. We lay the gear before night or we gain nothing." We bent to the oars again. The slime on Tom's oar was forgotten out loud, but not in my head. Each time my own blade dipped, I wondered what might be passing under it. By late afternoon, the soundings told us we had reached the ground the captain wanted. The lead came back with a smear of dark, sticky mud on the tallow. The depth was great, more than the usual banks, but not beyond reach of our lines. The wind had died to almost nothing, so we let the sails hang and worked by hand. We set to baiting the long line hooks. The barrels of bait gave off a strong, sour smell that mixed with the tar and the chill air. My fingers went numb as I worked, skewering chunks of fish onto cold iron. Baptiste hummed under his breath again, but the tune had no lift to it now. Eli worked beside me, quick and precise, his face empty of expression. Old Murphy checked each gangion, each knot, each hook. He moved slower than the rest of us, but he missed nothing. Once he paused and held up a hook that had a small nick in the point. "That will cost us a fish," he said. O'Rourke told him to toss it. The old man did, but he shook his head while he did it. We streamed the line over the side, buoy after buoy, weight after weight, until it sank into that depth. The floats bobbed for a moment, then stood steady, rocking in place. They marked a path across the water, curving slightly with the movement of the sea. When the last one was out, we coiled down what was left of the line and waited. Waiting on a quiet deck can draw a man's thoughts into places he would rather not visit. I found myself listening again for that heavy knocking I had heard in the night. There was none now, only the gentle creak of the spars and the soft rattle of loose gear. "Give it time," the captain said. "The fish will find it." We did. Pipes came out. A bit of bread passed around. The sky overhead stayed pale and hazy, and the horizon in every direction looked the same. I tried to picture the bottom below us. I imagined slopes and hollows, rocks and weed, and whatever moved between them. I did not try to form it too clearly in my mind. After a while, the captain gave the word to haul. We took our stations and began to pull the line back in. At first it came easy, just the weight of the rope and the slight pull of the current. Then there was the familiar tug of fish on, spaced along the length. The line shook and twisted. The first hooks came up with cod on them, white bellies flashing, mouths gaping. Baptiste gaffed them in and flipped them to the deck. The sight of the first solid catch eased something in my chest. "Good size," Tom said. The next dozen hooks came much the same. Then the pattern broke. O'Rourke swore and held up a length of line where 3 hooks in a row hung empty, the gangions frayed and cut. The ends were clean in places, torn in others. "Something took them," he said. "Sharks," Tom suggested. "Maybe." The captain frowned. "Keep hauling." We did. More fish came up, but many had strange marks on them. Round wounds in the flesh, neat circles where the skin had been broken. Some showed a pattern of smaller pits inside the circle, pressed deep into the meat. The marks clustered along the flanks and backs, not the places where they were hooked. "What did that?" I asked. No one answered right away. Baptiste leaned close to one of the fish and traced a finger near one of the round scars without touching it. "Not teeth," he said. "Too even." Old Murphy stared at the damaged fish with a grim look. "Leave them," he said. "They will still sell once trimmed." We kept going. The pile of catch on the deck grew, but so did the number of empty hooks and the odd wounds. Then something else came over the rail. Tom and I were hauling in together when the line went heavy, not with the twitching pull of a fish, but with a dead weight. We both leaned back, straining. The rope sliced cold into my palms. Whatever was on the other end gave no fight. It simply hung there. "Easy," the captain said. "Don't part it." We worked hand over hand until the thing broke the surface. At first I thought it was a length of rope. It was long and pale, with a faint pinkish cast and a smooth, wet skin that shone in the fading light. It hung from the hook in a curve thicker than my arm at the butt and tapering toward the end, where it had been torn. Along one side ran a double row of round suckers, each rimmed with a ring that looked hard and white, almost like small cups set into the flesh. The end that had been ripped off was ragged, fibers of muscle hanging in strings. It dripped water and a clear fluid that smelled faintly sharp and sour. "What in God's name is that?" I breathed. No one answered at once. The men stared. Even the captain's face lost some color. Baptiste found his voice first. "Calmar," he said quietly. "A big one." "A tentacle," old Murphy said. His voice sounded thin. "A piece of it, anyway." Tom reached out and nudged it with the back of his knuckles. The flesh yielded and then pushed back. One of the suckers twitched and gave a small, soft pop as it shifted on the hook. The movement was slow and weak, but it was there. "It's still alive," I said. "Not for long up here," O'Rourke muttered. The captain cleared his throat. "Cut it free and throw it over," he said. Baptiste hesitated. "We could take it in, show the others." "Show them what?" the captain snapped. His eyes moved from the tentacle to the men's faces and back again. "We are not out here to frighten ourselves. Cut it loose and keep hauling. The light is going." Baptiste looked as if he might argue, but he thought better of it. He took his knife from his belt and sliced through the gangion. The pale length slid back into the sea without a splash, vanishing into the dark beneath us. We went back to the line. No one spoke for a time. The only sounds were the wet slap of fish on the deck and the rasp of rope on the rail. I could not stop seeing those suckers in my mind, that limp but living flesh. After we finished, the deck was a mess of scales, blood, and bodies. The catch was not what we had hoped for, not for a ground that far out, but it was not poor either. Only now each man looked at it with a different eye. "Those marks," I said, pointing at a fish whose side was dotted with circular wounds. "They came from that thing, didn't they?" Old Murphy nodded once. "It feeds down there. Took fish off our hooks. We just happened to hook the wrong part of it." "Or the right part," O'Rourke tried to joke, but nobody laughed. The captain ordered the fish cleaned and stowed. We worked without the usual rough talk. Knives flashed in the low light as we gutted and split. More than once I saw the same marks inside the bodies, on the skin of smaller fish in their bellies. Whatever hunted down there had been busy before our gear came near. As we worked, old Murphy spoke suddenly without looking up. "I saw something once off Flores," he said. "Years back. We were whaling then, a calm day, flat water. A shape came up near the ship. Not all of it, just an arm, thick and long, with suckers that big." He held his hands apart. "It touched the hull and then went down again, left marks on the planks. We called it a devil and moved on." "Stories," the captain said shortly. Murphy did not argue. He only wiped his knife on a rag and went back to his work. Night came quick. The sky went from dirty white to a dull, solid dark. We lit the lanterns again. Their small circles of light left most of the deck in gloom. The wind stayed light and uncertain, puffing now from one direction, now another. "We stay on this ground," the captain said. "There are fish here, whatever else there is." No one suggested leaving. The thought of making the run back with only a half load would have drawn other hard words, creature or no creature. Still, when the anchor went down and the chain rattled out, I saw the way the men glanced at the water. I drew first watch that night along with Eli. We paced the deck, our boots thudding softly on the damp planks. The holds were closed. The smell of blood and fish still hung in the air, mixed with the smoke from the galley stove. "Do you believe Murphy's tale?" I asked in a low voice. Eli took a long time to answer. "I believe he saw something," he said. "Do you think it is the same? What we hooked?" He shrugged. "There are things in the deep we do not see from shore." I looked out at the dark water again. The floats from our lines bobbed faintly in the lantern glow before vanishing into the black beyond. I thought of that arm we had cut loose, sinking down to wherever it had been torn from, leaving a trail behind it. The hours dragged. Once, near midnight, a shudder ran through the hull. It was not the usual roll of a wave. It felt like a single heavy grip and release somewhere below the waterline. Eli and I both stopped and stared at each other. "You felt that," I said. He nodded. "Wake the captain," he said quietly. By the time the captain came on deck, nothing moved. The sea around us looked calm. The floats bobbed in their places. The wind touched our faces in faint gusts. "Something took hold," Eli said. "On the hull." The captain laid a hand on the rail, as if he could feel some echo in the wood. His jaw tightened. "Keep your eyes open," he said. "If you see anything on the surface, call me." He looked at the dark water a moment longer, then went back below. We finished our watch and turned in. I lay awake longer than I wanted, listening. Nothing knocked this time. The silence pressed down. I do not know when sleep finally took me, only that it did not hold for long. I woke to shouting on deck. The light that reached down into the forecastle was thin and unsteady, swinging with the motion of the lantern above. I scrambled out of my berth, boots barely laced, and climbed the ladder. Cold air hit my face as soon as I reached the deck. The men were already gathered at the rail on the starboard side, their bodies tense, eyes fixed on something below. "What happened?" I asked, pushing in beside Tom. He pointed down. "One of the floats is gone." I leaned over the rail. The surface of the water was dark and uneven with the small morning chop, but he was right. There was a gap in the line of floats. They had been spaced evenly the night before, forming a clear pattern across the sea. Now a whole section was missing. "Could have drifted," O'Rourke said without much conviction. The captain shook his head. "They would move with the others. They were cut loose or pulled under." Old Murphy cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted toward the missing section, as if expecting someone to answer. Only the wind replied. We launched the dory to check the line. O'Rourke took the bow, Tom the stern. I was sent along to row. The oars dipped with faint splashes as we pushed out across that still, heavy sea. No birds followed. The sky overhead held a wan, milky color, the sun smothered behind a layer of thin cloud that gave no comfort. When we reached the first intact float, O'Rourke hooked it with the gaff and hauled it in. The rope attached to it was slack. He hauled hand over hand until he reached a point where the line ended in a clean cut. The edge of the rope was frayed only on the surface, but the inner strands looked sliced. "That's a blade," Tom murmured. "Not ours." O'Rourke turned the rope in his hands. "Too clean, too smooth." "What cuts rope under the water?" I asked. He did not answer. We checked 2 more floats. Both had been severed. The line between them was gone entirely. Where it had sunk or been pulled, we could not tell. Tom leaned far over the side at one point, staring down into the shadows below. "Something's down there," he said again, but his voice held a new tone now. Not a warning, but a certainty. We returned to the schooner and reported what we had found. The men stood in a loose circle near the rail. No one raised their voice. The tension lay like a weight on all of us. "We haul what remains and then leave this ground," the captain said. "We have enough fish to justify the trip, and nothing here is worth the trouble it promises." No one argued, even Baptiste, who usually pressed for one more set, nodded. We began hauling the remaining lines. The work was slow. Several more hooks came up empty and cut. Others came up with half fish on them. The wounds were the same round marks, only deeper now, as if the creature had taken its time. Then something unexpected broke the surface. It was not a piece this time, not a random bit of flesh. It was an eye. A fish came up first, limp and torn, and behind it something rose with it. A round, dark eye the size of a plate lifted just enough above the surface to reflect the gray light. It looked at us. I knew it looked at us. The water rolled once around it, then it slid down again without a sound. I staggered back, nearly dropping the line. "You saw that," I said, breath tight. "We all saw it," said Baptiste quietly. The captain stepped forward. "Enough. We finish this and go." But the sea had its own plans. Without warning, the schooner lurched. The deck tilted sharply to port. Several of us were thrown against the rail. A heavy knock sounded from under the keel, strong enough to rattle the lantern on the mast. "Something hit us," Tom said, voice strained. Another impact followed, this one deeper, like a fist pressed slowly against the wood before sliding along it. The hull groaned. The whole vessel vibrated as if some vast body brushed against it. "Axes," the captain ordered. "Stand ready in case the hull opens." Men scrambled for tools. The dory line rattled on its pin. The sea on the port side rose in a broad swell that did not match the wind. It lifted us gently, then lowered us again. Then came the sound I will never forget, a scraping, dragging noise along the planks like dozens of wet hands pulling. The wood flexed. The deck shuddered under our feet. The sound moved from bow to stern, slow and heavy. "Is it climbing us?" I asked. My own voice sounded thin and distant. Old Murphy shook his head. "No, feeling us." Before we could catch our breath, the next blow came. This time it struck low on the starboard side. The schooner jerked sideways and water splashed over the rail. A dull groan rose from the hull. Something enormous shifted beneath us. "Cut loose the lines," the captain shouted. "All of them!" We dropped everything and went for the nearest coils. Knives flashed. Ropes parted. Floats drifted free. I cut through a taut length that snapped back and lashed my knuckles. Blood welled, but I barely noticed. The water around the Marion Bell swirled in slow circles. I saw pale shapes moving beneath the surface, long, sinuous forms that twisted and vanished before my eyes could fully fix on them. Some curved close to the hull. Others drifted farther out, only to return again. Another thud sounded, this one against the keel. The vessel heaved. A shout went up from the bow. I ran forward. Eli pointed down. A huge shadow passed just under the surface, a long, shifting mass that moved with steady purpose. For an instant, a section of pale flesh broke the surface, the same texture and color as the severed tentacle from the night before, only far larger. The skin rippled. Suckers the size of my fist gleamed wetly. "It followed the piece we caught," Eli said quietly. "It wants more." "We give it nothing," the captain said. His voice held steady, but his eyes moved fast, gauging distance, wind, anything that might help. "Raise the anchor, now." We rushed to the windlass. The anchor chain came up slow, beating against the hull each time the swell shifted us. My arms screamed with the effort. Sweat mixed with the cold air. The water around us churned again as something brushed the hull, circling. Then the anchor broke free. The Marion Bell swung with the current. "Sails up," the captain said. "Any wind will do." We heaved on lines, pulling canvas into place. The sails caught a faint breeze and bellied out. The schooner moved inch by inch, the bow turning away from the churned water where the line had vanished. But the thing beneath us did not want us to leave. The next impact struck with enough force to knock 2 men off their feet. The deck pitched. A sharp crack sounded somewhere below, wood giving under stress. "It's trying to roll us," Tom shouted. "Hold fast," O'Rourke said, though he grabbed the rail with white knuckles. The hull shuddered again. A pale, long shape broke the surface at the starboard side, rising in a slow arc. Water streamed off it. It was thicker than my torso and mottled with round scars. Suckers lined the underside, each shifting as the tentacle curled and sank again. "Keep her moving!" the captain yelled. The wheel spun under his hands as he fought to keep the bow pointed into what little wind there was. The sails strained, the rigging moaned. I looked down once more. The dark shape beneath us kept pace, a vast blur shifting just out of sight. More tentacles rose and fell, their motion deliberate, testing, reaching. I felt the weight of its attention. I felt the cold certainty that it had followed us from the deep hollow below. We gained only a few yards before the creature struck again, this time not at the hull, but at the rudder. The stern jolted backward, the wheel jerked out of the captain's hands and spun hard. A sickening crack sounded from below. "We've lost steering!" the captain shouted. The vessel drifted sideways. The sails shuddered. The creature continued to circle, and all of us knew it was deciding what to do next. The schooner turned in the current with no course of its own. The sails shivered, catching wind only in short bursts that spun us instead of pushing us forward. Every man on deck stared at the water, waiting for the next strike. The creature did not rush. It circled with steady rhythm, a slow pattern beneath the surface that pressed itself into our nerves. "We need that rudder freed," the captain said. His voice held no panic, but the tightness in his jaw made it clear he had little hope it could be done. "If the spar is twisted, we may still pull it back into line." "You want a man over the stern?" O'Rourke asked. He said it as if expecting the captain to reconsider. "We do not have another choice." Old Murphy spat over the rail. "Send the boy. Too small to be worth trouble to that thing." My stomach tightened. Tom shook his head sharply and pushed past me. "I'll go," he said. "I've seen the rigging back there. If it's jammed, I can clear it quicker than any of you." The captain looked at him for a long moment before giving a curt nod. "Rope around your waist. Don't let go of anything unless you must." Tom stripped to his undershirt. His muscles were thick under the pale skin of his arms, and he moved with a steady determination that made the others fall silent. O'Rourke tied a heavy line around him, checking and rechecking the knot. Baptiste handed him a short-handled axe. "For the rope, not the beast," he said. "Do not swing at something you can't see." Tom managed a thin smile. "I don't plan on striking anything that moves." We moved to the stern. The sea churned faintly below, the wake shifting in confused patterns without direction. The tentacles had vanished for the moment, but the weight of the creature's presence hung over us. We lowered Tom over the stern until the water reached his chest. He hissed as the cold hit him. "Easy," O'Rourke said, bracing himself on the rail. "Tell us what you feel." Tom reached under the surface, his hand groping along the damaged rudder assembly. "Something's caught," he said. "Feels twisted in the hinge. I need to go under." The captain leaned in. "Hold your breath and make it quick. If you feel something move near you, come up." Tom nodded, took a breath, and dipped below the surface. The rope around his waist trembled as he moved. We leaned over the stern, straining to see anything below, but the water was a dark green smear. Only the faintest outline of his body showed in the shifting shadows. Seconds passed, then more. The rope gave a slight pull as Tom worked. My hands tightened on the rail. "Hurry," Old Murphy muttered. I counted the beats of my pulse. 30, 40, 50. "Pull him up," I said, unable to keep my voice steady. "Not yet," O'Rourke snapped. Then the rope jerked hard. Everyone froze. Another jerk, harder than the first, but not in the pattern of a man signaling to be hauled. It was a steady, dragging pull. "Pull!" the captain shouted. We heaved. The rope fought us, as if something below resisted. My palms burned. Eli braced his feet and leaned back, grimacing with effort. Slowly, the rope began to rise. Tom's head broke the surface. He coughed water and clawed at the stern rail with one hand while the other held the axe. "Something's down there," he gasped. "It took hold of the rudder." "What did you see?" I asked. He shook his head wildly. "Nothing clear. A shape dark. Close enough to brush me." We dragged him aboard. His legs hit the deck with a heavy thump. He sucked air through clenched teeth. "Is the rudder free?" the captain asked. "No," Tom said. "I couldn't reach the hinge. Something brushed my foot. I came up." "He did right," Old Murphy said. The captain stared at the sea again. The tentacles still hadn't broken the surface, but that absence only strengthened the sense that the creature was studying us. "We can't drift here," the captain said quietly. "We need another plan." O'Rourke wiped water from his beard. "If we rig a jury rudder, we might manage some control." "We don't have time for that," Murphy said. "It'll strike again soon." Eli stood at the rail, watching the shifting patterns in the water. "It won't leave," he said. "It thinks we stole something." "The piece we cut loose," Baptiste murmured. "Or the fish," I added. "No," Eli replied, soft but certain. "It isn't feeding, it's testing." A hard thud struck the hull from below. The deck shook. A wave surged over the rail and drenched our boots. The rigging rattled. Something moved along the starboard side, long, slow, dragging. "Axes," the captain said again. "If it breaches the deck, we fight it back." "How?" I asked. My voice trembled despite my effort. "You saw how big." "We fight until we can't," the captain replied, "or we scare it off." But he did not sound convinced. Another long shape rose near the bow this time. The tentacle curved out of the water. Higher than before, its suckers clamped and released with small, wet pops. Drops trickled from the edges and hit the deck. Baptiste raised his axe, but the captain held a hand out sharply. "Don't strike unless it touches the rail." The tentacle hovered for a moment, waving slightly as if tasting the air. Then it slid back down, leaving a line of disturbed water behind. "We need to lighten the deck," old Murphy said suddenly. "Get the fish out. The smell draws it." "That won't stop something this size," O'Rourke said. "Maybe not," Murphy replied, "but it might confuse it long enough to move." The captain considered. "Throw half the catch overboard, the damaged ones first." We went to work. Blood, scales, and cold bodies hit the water in a quick, steady rain. The sea frothed as the fish sank. The dark shape below shifted toward the commotion. More tentacles broke the surface, not to strike, but to gather. The creature focused on the scattered fish, its movements faster now, almost frantic. "Now," the captain said. "Get what little wind we have on our quarter. O'Rourke, lash the tiller as straight as it'll go. Eli, man the winch, we'll force her bow around." We scrambled. The sails caught a weak breath of wind, enough to give the Marion Belle a slow nudge. The vessel creaked, pushed awkwardly by both wind and current. The creature remained occupied with the sinking fish. For a moment I felt a small lift of hope. We were inching away. The tension in the men's shoulders eased slightly. Then Tom yelled, "It's coming back!" A massive shadow rose beneath the stern. The water bulged upward. A tentacle thicker than a mast shot out, slapping onto the deck near the rail. The suckers locked onto the wood with a heavy thud. Boards bent under the pressure. The deck tilted backward. "Cut it loose," the captain shouted. I grabbed an axe. The feel of the wooden handle steadied me. O'Rourke swung first, chopping at the tentacle near the edge. The creature jerked from the blow, but it didn't release. Another tentacle broke the surface and reached toward the railing, suckers searching blindly across the air. Tom swung his axe with a sharp cry, slamming the blade into the thick, pale flesh. A spray of fluid burst out. A deep vibration ran through the hull, as if the entire creature shuddered. "Again!" the captain yelled. We hacked. The tentacle tightened once, then loosened in a quick, sharp motion. It withdrew, leaving behind a slick smear on the deck that glistened under the lantern light. Another tentacle reached, but we struck it too. It recoiled before finding purchase. The creature pulled away from the hull. The sea boiled with its movement. The schooner rocked violently. The lantern above swung wide and nearly went out. Then a strange quiet settled. The dark shape below drifted eastward, turning broadside to us. The water rolled in its wake. "Is it leaving?" I asked. "No," Murphy whispered. "It's gathering itself." The captain stepped to the rail. "All hands prepare. The next attack will be worse." He was right. The water swelled to our port side, rising in a long mound. A pair of enormous tentacles broke through, stretching high before curling inward like arms closing for an embrace. The sight froze every one of us. "We can't let it grip the hull," O'Rourke said. His voice trembled. That frightened me more than anything. "Axes ready," the captain said. I tightened my grip. My breath came fast. The sea foam swirled around the curling limbs. The creature paused, suspended in the air and water both, poised to close on us. Then it struck. The two tentacles dropped fast, slamming into the port side of the schooner. The hull groaned with a deep, hollow sound that vibrated through my ribs. The deck jerked sideways, sending Baptiste to one knee. The rail bent under the force of the suckers locking onto it. The wood creaked as if ready to splinter. "Hit the bases!" the captain shouted. "Not the ends!" We moved as one. O'Rourke and Tom swung first, aiming where the tentacles met the bulging water. Their blades sank in a few inches before catching on the thick muscle. A spray of cold fluid splattered across the deck and stung my eyes. Baptiste swung next, followed by Eli with a sharp, controlled chop that landed clean. The tentacle nearest me curled inward, dragging the rail down with it. The slope of the deck pulled me toward the water. I dug my boots into the planks and struck at the thick, slick flesh with everything I had. The axe bounced once before biting deeper on the second swing. The flesh quivered under the blow. A low vibration rolled through the hull as if the creature felt every cut. Tom roared something wordless and brought his axe down again. The tentacle he struck convulsed, releasing the rail just long enough for the schooner to roll back upright. We staggered, each of us grabbing for purchase as the deck snapped level beneath our feet. "Again!" the captain shouted. We hacked, struck, and tore into what we could reach. The creature jerked the tentacles back, not in retreat but in preparation. I saw the muscles flex under the pale skin. The limbs rose higher, shadows against the low sun. "It's going to try to wrap us," old Murphy said. He was right. The tentacles dipped under the water and vanished. A heartbeat later, the sea bulged on both sides at once. Two more tentacles, longer than the schooner, rose from the deep and crossed over the deck, aiming to seize the hull from both sides. "No," the captain said under his breath. "Not this." He grabbed a gaff and thrust it forward. O'Rourke followed with a long hook. They slammed the poles into the crossing limbs to slow their descent. "Cut across the top," the captain barked. I clambered onto a coil of rope to gain height and swung my axe downward. The blade sank deep. A thick vibration shot through the tentacle and into the deck. Eli struck next, then Tom. All three weapons bit at the same section. The limb recoiled sharply, lifting away from the hull and sliding across the planks. It struck the mast as it retracted, shaking the whole rig. The other tentacle followed, but Baptiste and O'Rourke reached it in time. A quick succession of blows landed in the dense tissue before it could close around the hull. The sea churned again. The creature's huge shadow twisted beneath us, circling faster now. The water turned murky with a faint cloud of diluted blood. "It's wounded," Tom said. "We can drive it off." "No," Eli said. "It only angers it." Murphy wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "It knows we're trying to escape." The schooner drifted in a slow, helpless arc. Without the rudder, the wind barely moved us. The creature circled close, so near that the hull trembled even when nothing touched it. The tentacles lurked just below the surface, like pale, shifting branches in deep water. The captain's eyes kept scanning the horizon. "We need more wind. Anything." "The weather won't shift for us," Murphy said. "It's shifting," Eli murmured. We all looked up. The thin clouds were thickening. The dull sky darkened, not with evening, but with gathering cover. A faint stir brushed across the sails. "Is it enough?" I asked. "It will have to be," the captain said. But the creature moved first. A massive swell rose near the bow. A long limb thrust straight up, higher than before, and slammed down on the foredeck. The wood buckled. The lantern hanging there snapped off its hook and smashed on the planks, snuffing its light. The tentacle dragged across the deck, catching coils of rope and half-split fish, scraping them away with ease. I rushed forward, swinging at the broad section of the tentacle near the mast. The blade sank deep and stuck. I wrenched it free as Eli struck the sucker-lined underside. The limb flinched but didn't retreat. Another tentacle rose near the stern, sliding up the side and reaching toward the rigging. If it caught the mast, it could tear the entire structure free. "Keep it off the rig!" the captain yelled. O'Rourke charged, axe raised. Tom followed him, the two of them striking in rapid rhythm. The tentacle writhed and curled away, but not before ripping a length of rigging loose and sending it whipping across the deck. The rope lashed Baptiste's leg. He stumbled and fell hard, sliding toward the rail. I lunged and caught his arm before he could go over. His breath came in sharp gasps. "I'm fine," he said, though he clearly wasn't. The sea shifted beneath us again. The creature was repositioning. It was not striking blindly now. It was choosing, testing, planning. Silence fell briefly. The only sounds were the windless creak of the rigging and the slow, heavy churn of water below. "It's thinking," Eli said. A chill went through us. Then the attack came all at once. 4 tentacles erupted from the water, 2 on each side, rising fast, crossing overhead, and closing like the frame of a barrel. Their movement was deliberate, controlled. They were trying to crush the vessel from above and below at the same time. The captain shouted, "Strike the crossing points, now!" We split into pairs. Eli and I went to port, O'Rourke and Tom to starboard. Baptiste limped toward the bow with Murphy supporting him. The tentacles began to close, applying pressure. The deck bent, the masts groaned, the rail touched the edge of the overhead limbs. "Now!" the captain shouted again. I swung at the nearest limb. Eli struck beside me with perfect timing. The two blows landed together. The flesh quivered. A long groan rose from below. Tom's axe hit the starboard limb with a sharp crack. O'Rourke followed. Baptiste and Murphy struck the forward limb, their blows slower but still landing solid. The tentacles began to weaken at their crossing points. One recoiled sharply, peeling away from the rail. The gap widened by only a few inches, but it was enough to break the crushing force. Again! We struck once more. The tentacles peeled back further, writhing with pained, twisting motions. The pressure on the deck eased. A deep vibration rolled through the creature, a long, low pulse that felt like a sound but came up through the wood instead of through the air. The limbs drew back, not far but far enough. "It's backing off," Tom breathed. "No," Murphy said softly. "It's preparing something else." He was right. The creature sank deeper, the shadow below growing more distant but broader. The water stilled unnaturally around us, as though everything below was pulling inward. "What is it doing?" I asked. Eli stared into the depths. "Rising." The sea beneath the bow brightened with a pale shimmer. The creature was below us, directly below, readying a single decisive strike. "It's going to hit us from under," O'Rourke shouted. "Hold on!" the captain roared. We braced ourselves. I gripped the mast, breath locked in my chest. The sea swelled, the deck rose, and the giant squid came up. The bow lifted as something massive pushed the water upward. A column of pressure rose under the hull, forcing the schooner into a sharp climb. The deck tilted so fast that I nearly lost my grip on the mast. A deep groan came from below, the sound of wood under stress, followed by a sharp crack somewhere near the keel. "Brace!" the captain shouted. The sea burst open under us. The creature surged upward in a single vertical rise. Its full shape finally became clear. The body was long and heavy, thicker at the center, tapering toward the rear. The mantle rose above the surface like a swollen dome, scarred with old wounds and covered in a pale layer that glistened in the dim light. Several of the scars were fresh, including one large tear where the piece we had caught must have come from. Tentacles spread outward in all directions. Some were short and thick, others long and sinuous. They reached far beyond the length of the schooner. Water poured off them in sheets. The whole thing moved with steady force, not frantic or wild. It came up as though it had chosen this exact moment and knew exactly what it wanted to do. The surge lifted the Marion Belle out of the water by more than a foot. For a few seconds we were unbalanced on a pocket of rising pressure, then gravity dragged us down the other side. The bow crashed into the sea with a heavy impact. A wave washed across the deck. I slid several feet and caught myself on a cleat. The creature did not sink again. Instead, it shifted close enough that its mantle brushed the hull near the bow. The touch was firm. The schooner shuddered. "It's going to push us over," Murphy said. His voice shook. "Axes," the captain ordered. "Hit anything that reaches the hull." A long tentacle rose on the starboard side. It hovered for a moment before dropping toward the deck. Tom met it with a heavy swing, landing his axe squarely in the middle of the limb. The creature reacted with a rapid curl that knocked the axe from his hands. It clattered across the deck, spinning once before sliding toward the scuppers. Another tentacle came over the port side, searching across the rail. I stepped forward and swung at the base near the water. The blade dug deep, a flash of pale fluid spilled out. The limb snapped back with a force that nearly pulled the axe from my grip. The creature gave a low vibration that ran up through the hull. Eli struck the tentacle that hovered above the deck. His blow landed at one of the largest suckers. The rim folded inward. A faint tightening sound came from the flesh. He landed another blow before the limb retreated, but the creature was not simply reacting, it was positioning. The mantle slid along the hull again, this time closer to the stern. The weight, even underwater, pushed the schooner sideways. The deck tilted. The rail dipped dangerously close to the surface. "It's rolling us!" O'Rourke shouted. The stern dipped farther. Water splashed across the planks, reaching Baptiste and Murphy as they braced themselves at the bow. "Shift your weight," the captain yelled. "Port side, now!" We rushed as one to the opposite rail. The schooner groaned, hesitated, and slowly lifted back upright. The creature slid under the surface again, repositioning for another try. The swell grew larger near the stern. A tentacle thicker than any we had yet seen rose slowly, curling at the end, preparing to wrap around the rear of the vessel. "If it catches the stern, it'll drag us under," Tom said. The captain grabbed a boarding pike. "We stop it before it reaches." He thrust the pike forward. The metal head punched into the tentacle near one of the massive suckers. The creature jerked back, but only slightly. The pike bent under the pressure before the captain pulled it free. Another tentacle rose beside it, reaching in the same direction. The creature was attempting to seize us from the back and roll or pull us down. "Strike together!" O'Rourke shouted. "At the base!" We moved in quickly. Tom recovered his axe and took the lead. Eli, Baptiste, and I followed. We swung in a unified rhythm. The first blow landed, then the second, then the third. The tentacle convulsed, tightening and releasing with a heavy shake. The surface of the water rippled outward. The creature hesitated. Murphy stared over the rail. "It doesn't know if it wants to strike again or pull away." "Force it to leave," the captain said. "Make it think we're not worth the effort." The creature moved before he finished speaking. The mantle broke the surface again, this time only feet from the port bow. A cluster of shorter arms reached up and pressed against the hull. They pulsed, testing the wood with steady pressure. The schooner leaned toward that side. I watched the waterline rise dangerously close to the edge of the rail. "We need to cut it off the hull," the captain shouted. We surged forward. The short arms were thick and compact. Their suckers locked against the planks with incredible strength. I swung at the nearest one. The creature tightened in response, gripping harder. My axe bit deeper. The limb quivered. Eli struck beside me. Baptiste followed, landing a firm blow despite his injured leg. The creature released suddenly, pulling its arms free from the hull. The suction broke with a loud series of hollow pops. The pressure lifted. The schooner steadied. A long moment passed where none of us spoke or moved. We only listened to the sound of the water and the creaking of the exhausted rigging. "It's losing strength," Tom said, breathing hard. "Or it's reconsidering," Murphy said. "It's been hurt more than it expected." For the first time, I realized how much fluid colored the water around us. Pale streaks drifted just below the surface. A faint, sour smell lingered in the air. "It's circling slower," Eli said. We listened. He was right. The pattern beneath the water no longer raced around us. It drifted in a wide, unsteady, slow arc. The creature was pulling away, but slowly, with effort. The captain studied the movement. His shoulders eased slightly. "It's withdrawing." "No," Murphy said. "It's waiting." We watched the shadow disappear bit by bit. Tentacles slid under the surface and vanished. The mantle sank into the deeper water. The last trace of movement broke the surface near the stern, then faded. Silence closed around us. We waited for another strike. None came. Not a ripple disturbed the water beyond the slow rise and fall of the sea. "It's gone," the captain said quietly. No one celebrated. No one dared to. We waited another full minute. Then he added, "We leave this place now." Eli nodded toward the broken rudder. "We still can't steer." "We don't need to steer," the captain said. "We just need to move. Lash the tiller straight again. Get what wind we have." We worked quickly, tying the damaged assembly in the most centered position we could manage. The sails caught the faint wind pushing east. The schooner responded weakly but clearly and began to drift away from the hollow where we had found the creature. I stood by the rail and watched the water behind us. Nothing followed. Nothing broke the surface. The sea remained dark and quiet. We moved slowly for hours. Only when the water lightened in color and the depth changed under the lead line did the men finally breathe easier. Only then did the captain allow himself to sit. Only then did we speak in full sentences again. But none of us forgot what had happened. None of us believed the creature had left without reason, and we all feared it might return before we reached home. We didn't rest. We didn't sing. We didn't speak of it again that day. We only watched the water and hoped the night would pass quietly. It didn't. Night fell hard and early, as if the sun wanted nothing more to do with that stretch of sea. Clouds closed over the last thin brightness, leaving only a dull smear of fading light in the west. We lit 2 lanterns, one at the mast, one near the stern, though none of us liked the idea of announcing ourselves. The schooner moved with a weak, uneven sway. Our improvised lashings on the tiller kept us pointed roughly east, but the slightest current shifted our course. With a working rudder, we would have been clear of that ground in a matter of hours. Now we crawled. Every groan of the hull kept our nerves tight. The water darkened around us. The horizon merged with the sea until there was no difference between sky and water. The wind whispered fitfully across the deck, barely strong enough to stir the lines. "We take shifts," the captain said. "2 on watch at all times, eyes on the water." Everyone nodded. No one argued. No one wanted to be below deck alone. I took the second watch with Tom. We stood along the starboard rail, each holding a lantern shielded with our palms so the light wouldn't glare into our eyes. The glow reached maybe 20 feet before fading into the dark. Tom's breath steamed faintly in the cold air. "Do you think it's still near?" he asked. I scanned the water. Nothing moved except the slow roll of the swell. "I don't know," I said, "but it doesn't feel gone." He nodded once. "I feel the same." We fell silent. The schooner creaked. The wind hummed through the rigging with a thin, uneasy tone. Every few minutes Tom shifted his stance, not out of restlessness, but readiness. Near the end of our watch, a faint sound drifted up from below the hull, a soft, distant tapping. I stiffened. "Did you hear that?" Tom lowered his lantern and leaned forward. Again. The tapping came a second time, a hollow knock, barely audible, like something brushing against the underside. "It's testing us again," he whispered. We called the captain quietly without alarming the others. He came up and listened with us. The tapping sounded a third time, faint and unsure, then stopped. "It's not rising," the captain said after a long moment. "It's drifting under us with the current. We leave it behind soon." His words sounded calm, but he stayed on deck for the entire next watch. By dawn, the tapping had not returned. The sky was a pale, miserable gray. A cold wind moved out of the northwest, giving us more push than we'd had all night. The sea brightened into a healthier shade of blue-green. The relief among the men was clear, though none dared to say we were safe. We ate cold bread and a bit of dried fish. No one touched the cod from the hold. The memory of the circular wounds lingered too sharply. "Water depth is rising again," Baptiste said as he hauled the lid 20 fathoms. Old Murphy nodded. "We've left the hollow." No one corrected him. No one laughed. No one repeated the name. By afternoon, we could see changes in the water. Cleaner currents, lighter swell, a scattering of birds far in the distance. The sight of those birds lifted our spirits more than any word could. Their distant cries made the world feel normal again. Tom leaned on the rail beside me. "When we get back," he said quietly, "I don't think I'll go out this far again." "No," I said. "Neither will I." "We'll have to explain the rudder," he added. "We'll tell them it broke on a shoal," I said. "That's all." He nodded. "That's all." But as the sun dipped low again, turning the clouds a muted orange, Baptiste called out sharply from the bow, "Something in the water behind us!" All of us rushed to the rails. The captain raised his spyglass. A few seconds passed before he lowered it slowly. "A current disturbance," he said carefully. "What kind?" O'Rourke asked. "A long one," the captain replied. The men held their breath. "How far behind?" Eli asked. "A mile," the captain said. "Closing?" Murphy asked. "No," the captain answered. "Holding distance." We watched the water until our eyes stung. Behind us, far back on the edge of the wind-driven ripples, a darker band of movement traced a slow pattern. Not approaching, not retreating, just drifting. "It followed," Tom said under his breath. "Or it surfaced for air," Baptiste muttered. "Squid don't breathe air," I said. "Nothing that big should exist," Murphy replied. The dark patch behind us shifted slightly, but did not change distance. "It's letting us leave," Eli said. "Or watching to be sure we go," Murphy added. The captain turned from the stern. "Focus forward. Don't waste your eyes on what we cannot fight. If it wanted us, we wouldn't be having this conversation." The men returned to their posts slowly. No one spoke for several minutes. The wind held steady, pushing us farther northeast. The schooner creaked less. The rigging steadied. By nightfall, the dark patch had vanished, but not our dread. We kept triple watches through the night, 3 men at a time spaced around the deck. I took the last one before dawn with O'Rourke and Murphy. The sea was calm, the wind steady, the sky patchy with thin clouds, but the tension did not ease. Sometime near the end of the watch, Murphy stepped close to the rail and stared down at the dark water below. "What is it?" O'Rourke asked. Murphy didn't answer at first. Then he said, "There's a shadow, deep." O'Rourke and I leaned beside him. At first I saw nothing. Then the water shifted. A dark shape moved far below, so deep that only the faint distortion of its outline was visible. It was long, broader than the schooner, moving slowly, maintaining distance. "It's still here," I whispered. Murphy nodded. "It wants something." "What?" O'Rourke asked. "It wants us gone," Murphy said, "and it wants that piece we took." The creature drifted below for several minutes, never rising, never retreating, only staying just visible enough to make its presence known. Then the shape sank lower until it disappeared into the darker depths. Dawn broke gray and hollow. The shape did not return. We sailed for 2 more days without incident. The water stayed calm. The sky stayed overcast. No shadow followed us again. Then, near dusk on the 3rd day, a faint tremor ran through the hull. Small, soft, like a touch. Every man on deck froze. The tremor came again, just one more. Then nothing. For a full hour we stood at our posts, watching, waiting, fearing a final strike. But the sea stayed quiet. The creature did not return. The last sign of it died with that trembling touch. We reached harbor the following evening. The town lights across the water were more beautiful than anything I had ever seen. The smell of smoke and fishmongers hit me like a memory of safety. Men on the wharf waved and called as we eased in, curious about our damaged rudder, puzzled by our late return. We tied off. We unloaded the catch. The merchants complained about the damaged fish, then paid us anyway. They grumbled about our story but said little. Fishermen talk. Fishermen also lie. They assumed we did the same. We did not correct them. None of us told the full truth. Not that night. Not ever. We patched the Marion Bell. We prepared for the next voyage. Life in the harbor went on, but some nights, when the wind dies and the tide runs low, and I look out across the dark water beyond the last line of lanterns, I remember the shape that followed us, the tentacles that tested our hull, the eyes that rose above the water only once and looked directly at us. I remember the final trembling touch, like a reminder, like a warning.